I understand a little bit more. You're a driver, you have to decide, do I want to spend New Year's Eve, celebrating, or do I want to work? So that there could be some incentive problems for having drivers on the road, but I don't know. And I think that would be something that either industry or the administrator would have to bring to us, so that we're not creating a solution to a problem that we don't really know exists. I think as far as the conventions go, those didn't just start happening. So this town is pretty good at dealing with those. I think if the administrator said, hey, we've got a ton of complaints that, around, one of these conventions, or if industry came and said, hey, we're having problems getting drivers out, and there's a critical need to benefit the public, at that point, we might want to address it. But otherwise, other than that, I think we might be searching for problems that don't exist.
Mr. Chairman, the one thing that strikes me that we haven't heard, we all know that the ride share is able to do surge pricing, and we know they do it. You're generally aware. And I don't know if it's possible to track, but when we look at the surcharges we're being asked to approve and approving them, we see that it's getting more drivers in every event, which is a good thing, but I don't know how that compares. All we've heard is the one time we went beyond what industry asked for, the surge went off, and then it became counterproductive very quickly. But anything else, I don't know if we're matching the surge, if we're exceeding the surge, if the surge prices are way above the surcharges. And I don't know if that's something that's trackable. But if it was, I'd be interested to know that.
Do you know? I'm not sure if it's trackable, but my thoughts are, I think people like to know what they're going to pay when they get inside the cab. Mm-hmm. And with the surcharger, with the dynamic pricing that the TNCs have, I don't know that they know that, but they can see it right on the wall. This is what you're going to be charged when you get into this cab and you go. And I think that's part of it. I don't know how we would be able to track the dynamic pricing that the TNCs have. I've asked my staff to start looking at volumes of people coming into town for other events, and I can get some of that stuff to you at the next meeting as well, because if it turns out that you give me that authority to do that, I'm going to want to know what the events are. I know Taylor Swift brings a huge crowd to town when she's here. Do we want to look at that? So if we can start taking a look at visitor volumes, I think that will help in both of these situations.
Well, one of my senses, TNC's surcharges is that they can take them off like that.
Correct.
They just disable it, and it's not there. We don't have that kind of flexibility under the rate making process.
And from what I understand, it's just based on volume. When the volume goes up, the algorithm goes out, and it goes up, and when it starts to drop,
it's an algorithm that automatically operates based on how many of their vehicles are in use. Any other direction you need us? At least information?
Yes.
Is everybody comfortable with moving that way?
Which way? Oh, additional information?
Additional holistic data next month, and then we can start talking about, okay, what this quarter looks like.
Yes.
And I will take on the responsibility of putting some concepts on a piece of paper on Fernal.
F1 is that next event?
Yeah.
So do we know when F1 is?
November.
It's in November.
I would suggest that we start with the ones that we know that we've had requests to approve the surcharges. Start with those, the regular annual ones, come up with a standing order, and then maybe decide whether we want to look at other types of things and keep it simple so that we're not holding that up in order to look at a whole broad picture.
Okay, so can I state back to you what I think you just said, because I think it's a really good idea.
Sure.
We have a set of pilot surcharge orders. What you're, I think, suggesting is take those pilot surcharge orders and merge them into a single standing order for those events that we have already done
Yes,
and start with that.
right.
So that that's in place, could be on the agenda next month.
Yep.
And then get the other statistics, the holistic statistics, and go through the process of, okay, beyond that, what additional kind of a surcharge order would we want to consider or an
Exactly.
amendment?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, I think that is a very thoughtful way to move forward because it's doable for us to take the previous orders and merge them into a single order. Right, Ms. Webb?
It is. Did you want to address the times? Earlier, I had heard you say that there were complaints. Some of the times were
Yeah, I think
lasted too long.
I think that would be something we'll have to debate when we look at the draft order. Based on what the administrator statistics tell us about where we moved, how long do we need to back this off? 6 hours, or we need to back it off an hour a day or whatever, right? Because there's one where it seemed, and then one where I don't want to repeat is where it was on for 2 hours and off for 2 hours. That's just one. It's difficult for the certificate holders. It's also crazy for the public. It's time how fast do you pack your bag and get to the taxi and you don't even know. So, okay, that's a very good idea. So that would be on the agenda. Both the statistics and merge. Anything else on this matter? Do we have any action to take? Anything else you need from us on that?
No, sir, thank you.
That takes us to agenda item 6, which is the application of relief by YCS Yellow Cab LLC, YCS Checkered Cab LLC, YCS Star LLC, New Cab Acquisition LLC, New Cab CT LLC, New Cab CT LLC, New Cab 21 LLC to modify the color schemes. I don't know what the O/R is for discussion and possible action. We have an application for relief on file June 26, 2024. Good morning, council. Council's party, would you make your appearances?
Certainly. Good morning. For the record, I am Kimberly Maxon Rushton of the law firm Cooper Levinson, appearing on behalf of the noted applicants as set forth on the application and also in the notice that are posted for today's meeting. Joining me today is Mr. Michael Balin on behalf of the carrier applicant companies. Members of the Nevada Taxicab Authority Board, the request before you today is for the applicant carriers to utilize a uniform color scheme. Specifically, the carriers would like to use the consistent color of yellow. I've set forth in the application the basics as to why they want to do it, but I think before I get into the legal arguments, with your permission, Chair, I'd like Mr. Balin to give you, from an operational perspective, from the company's perspective, why they're making this request today.
Good morning. For the record, Michael Balin, Taxi Management. So when we started thinking about painting all our cars the same color, we started doing little focus groups amongst ourselves. Nothing formal, but anybody who's a traditionalist loved the idea. And the reason was everyone knows what a yellow cab is. And that's what we're really trying to accomplish here. We're with Uber in our market now, we have to find ways to be more distinguishable. And that's a challenge. The whole industry needs to be working on ways to do that. One of our owners flies in and out of Harry Reid quite a bit, and sometimes he'll go down to the Uber section where people are waiting for their vehicles, and there's hundreds of people down there where there's no waiting for cabs. So he'll strike up a conversation, say, let me ask you, why are you waiting here and not just go grab a cab? A lot of the younger generation doesn't even know what a taxi cab is anymore, literally. And they certainly don't know what our flat rates are. And we have to work at ways as an industry to change that. We definitely believe that by painting all our cabs yellow, it's going to get us more rides. And that's good for the industry, not just our company. We all are looking ways to increase our ridership. I also think it's good for the customer. The customer is going to know what cab they were in, what color it was. Everyone knows yellow. I don't even know our colors right now. We have 7 cab companies. I always have to look to see what's blue or pink or whatever the colors are. This way, if the customer lost an item, if they have a complaint, they're going to know what company they were in pretty quickly. And so we respectfully ask that you approve our request.
And Chairman and members of the board, you've heard the operational reasons and for the market purposes why the applicant carriers are looking for this. I mean, specifically, it's to increase the market share, not specifically of this company, but of the taxis in general, have a more robust appeal to the traveling public, that there are ample vehicles available to them. But we recognize that this is a statutory requirement relative to the color schemes and the insignias being distinct between each carrier. And what we would ask is that this body construe that statute to be applicable to separate and distinct carrier companies. As the TA sees it, although these are separate legal entities, they're really under a parent umbrella or an operational umbrella. And I want to make that clear, not a parent umbrella, but an operational one, in which you have a central dispatch, you have a domicile that is managed by a general manager. And so for those purposes, what I would submit is that the statute before you is antiquated. It was adopted initially in 1979 or 1969. There were changes that were made in 2017, and specifically by the Livery Operators Association. We sought to remove the obligation to maintain cruise lights. Again, they were antiquated. And we asked to not have to seek approval, pre-approval of the color schemes and the insignias from the TA before being able to utilize those. This is different because of the fact that we're asking to use a uniform color scheme. But what we're also asking is, or advising the board, is that the insignias will be distinct. Each of the companies has their noted certificate of carrier name on the car as required by the regulation. And those insignias demonstrate which company that car is associated with. And that, again, I would respectfully submit, was the objective sought by the legislature in 1969 when they wanted to mandate that they have the distinct color scheme between distinct certificated carriers. Recognizing today that we have points in technology in and around the vehicles that allow, again, carrier or the passengers to identify which car they're in, which certificated carrier. It's noted on the interior of the vehicle, noted on the exterior. And so for those reasons, we think that not only do the insignias demonstrate the distinctness of each certificated carrier company, but that the yellow color scheme will not otherwise confuse the public. And because, again, these are related companies, especially in the eyes of the TA, we would respectfully request approval of the application and the authority to utilize the one monocolor scheme of yellow. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. So I understand, I appreciate the presentation. The authority to grant your request lays with the administrator. I'm curious as to why this was presented in front of the board, and I have a concern, two concerns. One is I wouldn't want the board to usurp the administrator's authority unless he came to the board and said, hey, for these reasons, I would prefer the board to decide this. And the second concern is if your request was not granted by the administrator, this body would adjudicate an appeal. So by coming directly to us, is there a specific reason that you did that?
For the record, Kimberly Maxon Rushton, in response to your question, Member Decker, we did speak to Administrator Park about this, but because of the fact that it is a statutory requirement. So as you know, with regulations, those can be deviated from, and that would be within the administrator's purview. But because of the fact that it was a statutory requirement and there was an interpretational aspect to it, we mutually decided that we would bring the application for relief. My thought is that because this is a unique request, it probably was better that it reside with the board, at least because it's the initial request that you've entertained at this time.
And it's unique in the sense that there are 3 subsidiaries that will use the color scheme, but it's not unique in the sense that it does distinguish the cabs that, in accordance with the statute, from the particular company.
That is correct.
Okay, I got you.
Yes, sir.
I have no questions. I'm just kind of sitting here thinking, I remember when, if you saw a yellow car, it was a cab. Cabs were always yellow. Now, maybe we're getting back to that, I guess.
Got a
And I
big
also, for the record, I would note, and I did forward these to the TA, but back in, I believe it was 2021, and I apologize if my date is wrong, but when the company applicant carriers were approved to utilize the series LLCs, the request from the administrator at that time was to submit pictures of the respective cabs and what the insignias would look like. So again, to ensure the distinction and that a passenger would be able to know. And so those will not change. The only thing that is changing is that we're asking to no longer have to use varied color schemes, but instead use one single yellow color scheme, but maintain the unique insignias.
So this was noticed and published for the agenda today. The application was timely made. We're all good with open meeting law and everything?
Yes.
So does anybody in the industry object to this?
Desiree Dante on behalf of Lucky Western and Nellis. Based upon your decision today, this would then have to apply also to Lucky Western and Nellis that operate at the same location under the same management team.
So just to be clear and very specific, you would make a similar application to this board to allow you to have a similar color scheme?
I can't say we would at this time, but down in the future, that may be something we want to do. But the precedent has been set, it needs to apply to all.
Not yellow though, right?
No.
Well,
Fluorescent yellow, maybe.
Thank you.
And to your point, Member Graff, I don't think that this is that far off from what other related companies will want to do in the future too. I think it's an ease in which their passengers and the passengers at large will be able to identify their specific vehicles. And, you know, multiple carriers have certificates of different fleets and everything, but they operate under one kind of parent umbrella.
Mr. Balin's,
no,
if Mr. Balin's argument prevails, why shouldn't the relief be that every cab in the state of Nevada in our jurisdiction will be yellow? There will be some other method of distinguishing the company through the writing on it. And that is not a hypothetical. That is what is done in the District of Columbia. Every cab is red, black, and yellow. The scheme is the same. They're all the same color to distinguish them from a cab that comes from a state that is in the adjacent to the district. And the only thing that is the only distinction between them, and I'm only acquainted because I go to DC for work a lot, so I'm in these red cabs all the time. It is, as a cabbie will tell you, is, oh, I drive for a company, so that number on the back there says I'm a company driver, and the lease guy, they don't have leases, they have owners who buy the car. There's a different letter in front of the number that says this is a car that's owned by the guy driving. Would that not be the natural extension of the argument that you're making?
So in response to your question, Chair, I'd note the fact that when 706.8833, that's the governing statute, was modified, the industry was asking politely to not be required to seek approval from the TA to choose their color scheme. And it's the same thing here. It's all because of the fact that it should be up to the business operator to determine how to market their company in the way that they think is the best. So if other companies came in and asked for the yellow, and they have distinct insignias and everything, that would be within your purview to decide. I don't know if they would necessarily do that because they would want to possibly distinguish themselves from the applicant carriers. But the intent is, I would respectfully submit in 1969, was to give passengers the ability to say, I'm in this car. This is the car I was in. Now we have the technology, and again, we have a uniform dispatch in which the passenger could call and easily identify that, coupled with the insignia. But if another carrier came in and wanted to use the same color scheme, that's their business decision. We, or the applicant carriers could come in and object to it and ask that they not be allowed to do it, and that would be before you, but I don't know if anybody would want to, based on the fact that they somewhat want to distinguish themselves and their company so as to be able to attract drivers and attract passengers.
Do the applicant carriers have some intellectual property claim in the state of Nevada that other people could have yellow cabs?
Not to my knowledge.
Probably have protection of the word yellow.
I would need to check that. Possible, they definitely would trademark with respect to yellow cab company, yes, sir.
On the procedural question that Member Decker raised, Administrator Parks, did you decline to exercise jurisdiction? Is that what happened here?
We had a conversation about this. I spoke with Mona about it, and we felt that because each entity had their own CPC and their own certificate, that the statute did not allow for us to say it was okay for them to do that.
Say that again. Sorry.
Because each of the companies had their own CPCN, the statute does not allow for them to give all of those certificates the same color vehicle. Have the color scheme to be the same for each certificate.
So for the record and for the board members, the subsection 1 of the statute says the color scheme and insignia of the taxicabs of each certificate holder must be readily distinguishable from the color schemes and insignia of other certificate holders operating in the same county. So I believe procedurally that this could come to us either as an appeal or basically under the ability to apply for relief for us to construe by advisory opinion or declaratory order the meaning and guidance under. So I think procedurally it's just an application for relief. I don't think it had to come to us by appeal. I think it could come to us from a couple different routes under our rather porous procedural rules.
I understand. I would
but
say.
I do think it was
I
important
think-
that the record reflect.
Yeah, I think a tentative no, however, is not the same as the administrator taking a position and saying, here's your official answer, and now you can take it up with the board. I think we need that, to be honest with you. I agree, maybe technically we don't, but I like the idea of the agency exercising its authority prior to the board being petitioned to exercise its authority. Because I think that's how it's supposed to work. And if the answer is no, the answer is no, but I also think the agency should take that position in writing so that we would have that as evidence as well or to consider.
And to that point, Chairman, if I could just address that legally, the reason, Member Decker, that we did not file anything formally that we came is based on the changes that were made in 2017, that the industry did not have to come seek approval. But I would never advise a client, and I can tell you the 7 applicant carriers would never go out and be so bold as to do a uniform color and then wait to get cited. So that's why we came to speak to the administration and to say, what are your thoughts? Do you have a concern? And I agree. Administrator Park said, this is a statutory question, Kimberly. I mean, I have to follow the law and everything the way that it reads. And so that's when the mutual, I think somewhat mutual, and I don't want to speak out of term, was decided that we would file an application for relief and then pose it to the board and make our arguments relative to how you could construe this, looking at the legislative history and the specific statutory intent.
And I agree with you. I just think that the administrator owes you a no in writing for your records, but also for us to consider. Because right now we've got a tentative position that the agency's taken based on this conversation alone prior to us considering, number one, whether to accept the petition, but two, what to do on the merits.
And in response to that, my client just advised me that we do have a written decision.
I initially reached out to the administrator, and he said he loved the idea. He's a traditionalist. Correct me if I
No, you're
misstate on
correct.
this. And he likes us thinking outside the box, but he didn't think he could approve it. So I do have an email that states that.
I want to understand if there's an argument that that is being made that didn't grab a hold of initially. Is it your position, Ms. Rushton, that the 2017 statutory change was effective and implied repeal of NAC 706-487 subsection 1 that requires you to come and get his approval to make a color change?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That is correct.
What,
That was the specific intent.
which statutory, which statute was changed?
8833 changed
8833.
because it previously actually said the administrator had to approve the colors.
So I've just provided Member Decker a copy of the specific legislative changes that were made in 2017, so we could see what was stricken and what was added. And as you'll see, Member Decker, it specifically removed the obligation to seek pre-approval of the color scheme from the Taxicab Authority, from the administrator, excuse me.
Well, theoretically, in an instance where you decided to take one certificate holder, change it from pink to blue, you would need to seek approval. Obviously, this is not that scenario. So I would argue that in this scenario, you absolutely need approval from the administrator, not the board, administrator, to essentially interpret the statute regarding the separation of colors between certificate holders. So I would say this is irrelevant in this scenario, that they absolutely do need approval. I would argue it's from the administrator until he kicks it to the board. But
The nuance, now we're getting into over lawyering this perhaps, but I think the nuance of the argument is that the legislature took that authority away from the administrator. So where's that authority exist if it's not in the administrator? I'm just.
however,
I think that's.
it's a very
it might-
specific authority that they took. If they want to switch one certificate holder, so one subsidiary says, I want to change from pink to blue, they can do that without seeking approval. That is not this case. This case, they're saying, can we violate 8833 or can we interpret 8833 to mean that all of our certificate holders under this parent company can use yellow? That is not the same case as this statute change in which they might not need approval. I would argue that this is irrelevant and they do need approval because what they're doing is not going from pink to blue, one certificate holder.
When you're saying this is irrelevant, what are you saying?
Well, this statute change doesn't apply to this case, is my argument.
Can I see that?
Yeah.
So, and just to throw it all out there.
Yeah.
Right? See, I read 8833 a little differently because it says color scheme and certificate or insignia. So it's the combination. And so statutory construction, you read it together. So it's not just color. It's not going to be yellow cats. It's not going to be blue cats. It's not going to be red cats. It's going to be the yellow and the insignia, the yellow and the insignia, that sort of thing. So My daughter, who's an artist, will tell me that there are an infinite number of colors out there that they can, a palette is as big as you can afford to get, I think. But I think in this instance, if we have a company that is operated the same and they want to say color and insignia for all of their fleet and noticed it up, and the industry doesn't want to say, no, you can't do that because it would give them some unfair advantage. And I have heard none of that today. I want to make sure that that's what I want to say on the record here today. Nobody's got up and said they're going to have an unfair advantage by having all of their cabs yellow.
So I just want to make sure that I understand your argument or your interpretation.
Yep.
Your interpretation would allow every company to come in, every company could comply with 8833 with all cabs being yellow in the state, provided in connection with that color, there is some other insignia on the car that distinguishes it by certificate holder.
Yeah, that's how I'm reading it.
I agree with that interpretation.
Well, if you're
Because
saying,
it's consistent
Yeah.
throughout. It says color scheme and insignia.
so they both
throughout
must
the
be,
statute.
they both must be distinguishable.
So I
Not
think
just,
it's the
not just the
combination.
insignia, not just the insignia, but both the color and the insignia must be different than the other certificate holders. You're saying the color could be the same as long as, I don't read it that way. I think it's saying that both have to be different.
It says color scheme and insignia of the taxi cabs of each certificate holder.
Must be readily distinguishable. If
From
everything's
the color
yellow,
schemes and insignia
right,
of other certificate holders operating in the same county. So my point would be alphanumeric, right? You could have A1 is the certificate holder. You could have A2, you could have A5, you could have A6. Those are all distinguishable. That's what we're talking about. So we've got yellow, and it's going to be whatever their insignia is, yellow checker, star, whatever. That's what's going to make it distinguishable from all other certificate holders.
but the statute is specifically saying the color scheme and insignia, so the color scheme must be readily distinguishable and the insignia must be readily distinguishable from the color schemes and insignia of other certificate holders. It's literally saying the color must be different than the colors of other certificate holders.
Well, yeah, that's not how.
No?
No, that's not how I'm reading.
Let me give you an example and see. So could every cab be yellow? But for each certificate holder, a different stripe, color stripe has to be down side of each. So
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So I'll answer the question, but I'm gonna say we are on a tangent. This isn't what's being asked of us. The answer is no. The color scheme and the insignia must be readily distinguishable from the color scheme and insignia of competitors. So this doesn't answer their question because they're not competitors necessarily. They're all owned by a parent company. But if Desiree said, hey, we're gonna go to yellow too, but we're gonna have a pink stripe, I don't think that complies with the intent of the legislature when they say the color and the insignia must be readily distinguishable. I think that fools the public into thinking, hey, all cabs are yellow, you missed the pink stripe, you didn't know it was this other company. I think Yellow Cab would have an argument saying, hey, that's, they can't go to yellow, we're using yellow right now. And so, but I think we're way off track, by the way.
well, I think the reason I don't think we are is that we're going to make a decision today, and if it goes one way, it's going to be precedent for others. And so I don't know what their fact pattern will be when they bring it in.
Well, I know Desiree's
Will it
not going to
be-
yellow, she promised already.
Well, she's not going to go to that color of yellow, but she might decide that canary yellow is,
Right.
better,
Cheaper.
cheaper, or whatever, yeah.
Well,
What's the you know, at bottom, what we're supposed to do is interpret the statute to achieve what the legislature intended, what its policy purpose was. And I'm trying to figure out what the policy purpose was of a different color and insignia. Was it for law enforcement to be able to figure out?
I
Was
would
it?
say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
but-
go ahead.
But my thoughts on it are for lost property or safety reasons. A lot of times people will get into a cab, they don't look at the driver permit. They don't necessarily look at the color of the cab or the number on the cab or anything like that. But if you have a large car with its a specific color, you can call us up and say, hey, I was in at least this color of a cab, and we can know what company it was. And I still have those same concerns, because if everybody goes to yellow, a blue line on the bottom, I'm
Yeah.
not
But
sure.
this is an assumption that cab company marketing and branding is completely irrelevant to them and the public. And I'm not sure that's the case. If someone wants to drive a distinctive cab around and say, hey, this is our company, we do advertising, let's say on TV, or we spend a lot of money on, whatever, then we're saying that there's no unfair competition for the next person that drives a similar looking cab to benefit from, I mean, isn't there a branding issue as well that the companies care about?
But to the point, I think, again, when you look at the legislative history, as I indicated in 1969, you did not have uniform rates. The taxis were allowed to charge whatever rates they wanted to charge or that were approved and everything, but you didn't have uniform rates. You didn't have the same administrative structure as you have now, and you didn't have the uniform dispatch such as what the applicant carriers have, or the points of technology, as I indicated before. All of those factors were the reason why I would submit, and I've reviewed the legislative history in anticipation of today's hearing. They were to ensure that when a passenger had a complaint about a vehicle and they called the then PSC, they could say, that car was,
Right.
that they charged me too much, or they, long hauled me, if they knew what that was at the time. And so that was the reason. And you had a smaller fleet and you had a smaller community, Member Decker. So for these reasons, what we're saying is that we need to brand ourselves, in the taxi industry, and to make as much of a presence or presence known so that we can fairly compete with the TNCs. And this is just the first step. And I think you heard, from Desiree that this is a consideration possibly of other carriers, and we'd like that flexibility. And the reason why is, again, to try and do whatever we can to increase the market share of the taxi industry here in Southern Nevada.
So I'm now going to say something that will shock. I'm in agreement with Member Decker that color scheme and insignia is irrelevant to the issue before us today. And that's because I'm having great difficulty getting over of each certificate holder. I understand, I completely understand and sympathize with the fact that for business reasons, for acquisition reasons, that this is really one company that has structured itself with different LLCs, series LLCs, but each one of them is a different certificate holder. And I'm having difficulty squaring the request with the statute. I do get your argument about implied repeal of the regulation. That I don't think the whole regulation's gone, but I think parts of it are not functional after the 2017 legislature. And it's just a function of we never get around to, we haven't gotten around to cleaning up our regs. But I can't, the whole discussion of color scheme and insignia, if that were the issue and not certificate holder,
I frankly wouldn't care if every cab was yellow and they had different colored stripes.
Well, I think you've hit on the core question that we're being asked to decide is, does the certificate holder as used in the statute apply to a subsidiary and each one individually and separately, or can they apply it to the parent company and every subsidiary under it?
And can you construe it the way that Member Graff suggested in the
Pardon?
sense, can this board also construe it consistent with Member Graff's position? And that is that you don't have to get to the concern about having each certificated carrier have a different color scheme as long as the color scheme and insignia. So if you have the insignia and that's distinct amongst each certificated carrier, that's sufficient.
I don't think you're asking that, though. Because my answer to that would be no. If everybody in Clark County wanted to go to yellow, my answer would be no. Because that does not distinguish color and insignia. You might distinguish insignia, but the color is the same. If YCS, however, wants to go to yellow, that's not the same question. That's a different question. That is, does the certificate holder mean Y, C, and S separately, or does it mean all of them? That's the question.
So, and that's why I think it begs towards, yes, letting them do it. Because here's the following thing. Are there companies that have as their color scheme white? Are there more than one certificate holders that have their color scheme as white?
Yes.
Then we'd be being arbitrary and capricious to tell them that they can't all be yellow.
Well, they're white, but that's a base. It's a base of the other colors. Yeah, and other colors with the white. Yeah.
Yellow.
So it's white with green or white. So if you could, same as my example of yellow with a red stripe or,
Yep.
or red hood or.
Yes. Well,
That would be my point. My point is that if the color scheme is white and then like, so I think it's desert that's white and has some brown on it or something like that or whatever. Orange, thank you. And then, that sort of thing. And then other companies have that same base color. What we're really talking about here is, yeah, we've got a base color that they want to have. And for me, if they came in and they all said, hey, we all want to be yellow, it sounds like a good idea. We want to differentiate. We want to be able to put ourselves out there as a united front against TNCs. I'd be open to hearing the argument. Because
As it currently stands, Member Decker, all of the respective new cab companies are all gray with a stripe. Oh, white with the stripe.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, there's only so many colors that cars come in,
Yes.
first of all. But
You can paint them any color you want.
that's true, and you can wrap.
We've seen
But a white vehicle, a white vehicle with white doors and black, that's a metro, but a metro officer. But you see a blue vehicle, I would tend to very, very firmly say that the certificate holder, as it's written in the statute, in this day and age, could apply to YCS overall. And I would be inclined to grant this with the caveat that it only applies to the parent companies, and that there's still a need for the companies to be distinct and distinguishable from the cabs and the subsidiaries of other companies. So,
So you're saying that the relief you would entertain is that for yellow cab, because all of their cabs will be yellow.
well, YCS, all of the yellow checker and star,
Well,
they're
taxi management, we have 7 cabs.
seven cab, okay, so they're all going to go to yellow, but they're all owned by the same parent company.
But that
Controlled
parent
by-
company is not a certificate.
I understand that,
Okay.
but what I'm saying is I would tend to be inclined to interpret the certificate holder as meaning certificate holders under that parent company who are not going to be complaining to us about unfair competition. They're managed by one group, so as far as the public is concerned, there's no reason to distinguish them. Yet clearly distinguish them from Desert and that group's cabs, and not. I think that there needs to be a color and insignia distinguishable from other outside companies that aren't managed by the same. So,
There is a definition.
Mr. Chairman, if I could weigh in.
Yeah, please do.
I agree with Member Decker. I was inclined to give a thumbs up to this before we even had the presentation. I think it's a good idea. You brought up a point that made me think we can fix with just a condition. These are a number of certificates that are owned and operated by one entity today. We don't know how that'll change. We don't know how future managements of this company might want to sell off one or two. And so therefore, I'd be inclined to grant the relief requested. All of cabs and all that are operated by this parent company would be yellow, with the condition that if any of these certificates, if we get a application for any of these certificates to be transferred to an unaffiliated entity, that it would also include a unique color scheme. That way, if down the road, current or future management of YCS wants new cab 21 LLC, they want to sell it to somebody, okay, we'll entertain that, but part of that application would need to be how they would somehow distinguish themselves, because now they are not under the YCS umbrella, they're operated by somebody else. And that would solve the issue of down the road, will consumers be able to easily, in their complaint, point out what cab they're on? And that might never happen. You know, at least in our lifetimes, YCS might keep all of these certificates. We don't know. But that would be the condition that I would put upon this to satisfy the concern that one or more of these certificates down the road could end up somewhere else.
Chairman, may I add something?
Yeah, go ahead. But let me just point out that NRS 706-8813 defines certificate holder as a person who holds a current certificate of public convenience and necessity issued for the operation of a taxi cab business. So that's part of my concern with this collapse of the entities. I totally appreciate your creative solution. Ms. Webb, go ahead.
That's exactly where I was
Oh,
going.
okay.
And I just, if an order does come from today, I would just ask that perhaps we include in it that for today, saying that the parent company is a certificate holder in effect, that's just an aberration when it comes to just the color scheme we're talking today.
well, look,
And then also, we put this on the agenda. We did not have the time to have a public hearing. If you think there needs to be a notice of public hearing, go out. This was just on the agenda. I didn't have time to get it in the newspaper for a notice of public hearing.
But Ms. Webb, on that point, I didn't, and I'm open to being told I'm wrong, always. I didn't see this matter, even the subject matter, not the procedural mechanism Ms. Rushton used, but the subject matter, I did not discern as being one for which publication of notice was required.
And I didn't think so either.
Okay.
However, I think we're getting close to calling a parent company a certificate holder for purposes of this case.
Yeah, and
So I wanted to be very careful with that.
Okay, and I take your point to Vice Chair Soderberg. It was kind of a friendly amendment. If you're going to make a motion like that, say that collapsing certificate holders amongst an umbrella of certificate holders is only for the purposes of construing 8833 and for no other purpose, because now the parade of horribles. If I wanted this, if one of YCS's certificate holders committed a violation and I wanted to revoke their certificate, I could now
use this mechanism to revoke all certificates, even though, so I get your point with this precedent could end up being problematic. Well, is anybody prepared to make a motion, or do we need further discussion? Further?
I'll take a stab.
Okay, among motions are to table.
Okay. I move that we approve the application for relief conditioned upon any transfer application of the certificates in question. Need include the approval of a unique color scheme, or in the alternative, why a unique color scheme is not necessary.
Second.
Just say that one more time.
That we would approve the application conditioned upon any transfer application of the applicant certificates be required to provide a unique color scheme, or in the alternative, why a unique color scheme is not necessary.
I would like to add a friendly amendment to that wording. We could say why a unique color scheme.
Excuse me, Member Decker. So under Robert's rules, we need a second to amend.
I second and
Okay.
propose an amendment.
Okay.
Why a unique color scheme would not increase or create competition that would be detrimental to the traveling public or industry.
I would accept that amendment to my motion.
Would you also accept an amendment that that we are, that this is a interpretation of 706-8833 as to the meaning of certificate holder that is only applicable to this statute?
I would accept that amendment.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. The first discussion is, does the Attorney General's office have anything they want to say? Going.
Did the Attorney General's office bring enough caffeine for this item?
I'm having trouble hearing you, Mr. Chairman. What did you propose on the amendment? Did you amend again?
Yeah, the amendment, the second amendment was that this motion is an interpretation of 706, NRS 706-8833 as to what is meant by certificate holder is only applicable to the construction of this statute. Such that this doesn't become precedent in some other context as to collapsing what certificate is to a parent. Discussion?
He doesn't have anything. I do have a discussion. NAC 706.486. So the criteria that the administrator might use in order to have given approval to this application states that he will consider the color scheme, insignia, cruising light design, and assignment of unit designation numbers to ensure they do not conflict with those of another certificate holder. I think we've established in this case that the certificate holders under the parent are affirming that they don't conflict. In fact, they're requesting that we approve these because there is no undue competition between those companies. And I want to state that very specifically because I'm very much against the idea that everybody in Clark County goes to yellow, but they just changed the insignia, and I want to make sure that that's not where we're headed.
Just for purposes of the record, is there one owner, entity or otherwise, of all of these applicants? And is it consistent?
For the purposes of the record, Kimberly Maxim Russian, these are all series LLCs, member graph. So as you can imagine, there's operational entity, and then you have the respective series that hold the vehicles, the equipment, the medallions, things such as that. So they're related in that sense, but for the purposes of protecting the liability of the company, that's why they're separate and distinct as series LLCs. But yes, they're all under the same common ownership, same general manager, same domicile, same dispatch.
We did consider this one. I think I was the one that approved your series LLCs.
Yes, sir.
This was not something that they had requested at the time.
And truthfully, when we made the amendments in 2017, Yellow Checker Star wasn't in the position. They had not acquired the previous entities. And so this wasn't something that I think we really could contemplate at the time. So.
Do you have anything further?
No?
Um, I'm going to not support the application because I don't believe that we have the authority to under 8833 because the definition of certificate holder is very clear. I want to make abundantly clear on the record, I support the concept of the application, the purpose of it. It's applying all 67 rules of statutory construction. I can't get there with you. And it's no disrespect to the applicant or you, Ms. Rushton. I just can't get there. So.
I have a question for the minister. Can an organization or an entity besides a individual person receive a certificate?
Not that I'm aware of. I think
couldn't
we didn't hear you because you were.
So is a certificate issued to an individual person or can it be issued to a corporation or a company?
I believe it has to be issued to an individual, and I believe that was in the statute that you just read.
Yeah.
I actually believe that person's not defined in this chapter, and so it's 0.039 of the statute, which says it's a natural person or any business organization under Title VII or comparable state statute other than a government. So I think,
So a person can be a corporation?
yes.
Okay. Well, I would just, I don't disagree with you. I don't think it's in statute, and really the answer probably is it requires a statute change. I think the statute isn't clear to the extent that the legislative declaration of purpose states that are trying not to create competition that would be detrimental to driving public. This has nothing to do with that, and therefore probably doesn't uphold that declaration of purpose, and therefore could easily be changed, but probably does need to be changed. On the other hand, the separation of certificate holders in this case is nominal.
Yeah,
So
I'm
Done for
respectful.
tax liability.
you're right.
I'm respectful of both positions.
Yeah.
I'm just wanted the record to be clear as to why I was voting the way I was. So if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Mark is opposed.
Thank you.
Ms. Rushton, thank you. Thank you.
And I just wanted to note that when we talk about legislative changes, if you'll take a look at 8831 about the mandatory statutory requirement that certificated carriers have a listing in the telephone directory, perhaps the TA would consider adding that to their legislative agenda to repeal, since I'm not sure that we do that.
Well, you better be.
What's
in
the telephone
You better be
directory?
in the telephone directory.
You know, to your point, Member Decker, I actually took a telephone book to my 20-year-old daughter and said, have you ever seen one of these? And she looked at me dumbfounded, like,
She said, yeah, I think I was holding the door open to my room
Yes,
when
sir.
I was a baby.
thank you.
My grandchild still sits on one at the
I know.
table.
And that's pretty much it.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Did it pass?
Yes,
It did pass.
yes, 3-4.
Okay.
Three to four. One dissent.
Yeah.
So after that,
lively discussion. We're to agenda item 7, staff reports. Take it away, Administrator Park.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, this is my first board meeting as the administrator, and I wanted to take the time to thank the board for going through the process and putting my name forward as your pick for the administrator. I've been out speaking with the industry. A lot of them did not know that I was appointed as the administrator, but now that I am, just wanted to thank the board for your support in that whole process. I can tell you, it's not a fun process at all. But it was good to hear the comments during the interview process. So
Just so you know, I went through it and didn't get the job about 10 years ago. So I've been through it.
yeah, it's not a lot of fun, but anyway. I did not let the grass grow under my feet. I had been wearing 2 hats for quite some time, and that was a very difficult situation for me. And so I put out a recruitment right away for a deputy administrator, and I'm happy to report that I've hired one, and I would like to introduce the board, or him to the board now. His name's Adam Petty, and I'd love to have him take just a few minutes and kind of give you an overview of who he is and what he's all about.
Thank you, Administrator. Appreciate it. Adam Petey, for the record, Deputy Administrator. Third day, so my first board meeting at the TA also, but just wanted to say hi, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that the administrator had given me. This is an agency that I started my public service at 18 years ago. I started as an airport control officer and worked my way up through the law enforcement side. I left, spent 10 years at the Taxicab Authority, went over and spent another 8 years over at the Transportation Authority, supervised the shift over there, and now have the opportunity to come back and the deputy administrator. So I'm grateful for that opportunity. The Taxicab Authority is truly has a place in my heart. I have relationships with the industry that I've maintained, being that I do have 18 years in transportation. So I'm grateful to be back, and I'm really looking forward to working under the administrator and the board. I've enjoyed the spirited discussion today. That's been phenomenal. And I think we're in a good position to move towards the future. So I'm appreciative again. Very excited to start.
Adam checked a lot of boxes for me, and he will be taking over the enforcement section, and he'll also oversee the inspectors. That's going to release a lot of my time, and I will still be overseeing a lot of that. And Adam and I have worked together for several years. We don't always agree on everything, but I didn't want somebody that was always just going to agree with me. I wanted to be able to have conversations, and Adam knows how to approach me. I know how to approach him, and I think we're going to work very well together. So I just appreciate him being here today and you guys getting to know him. And I will give you his number as soon as we can. So
Yeah, I don't sleep much, so the phone's always next to me.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The gasoline, the fuel charge will drop off this next Tuesday. I wasn't sure if you guys were aware of that, but that does drop off on Tuesday. I have been out meeting with the industry. Curtis and I have gone out. We've almost reached everybody. I know I have another one this Friday. Some of the topics that we've been talking about is how the industry handles accidents. We have, and you'll see in the stats, every month we have a lot of accidents. And I just want to make sure that the process is working. I'm very pleased with our dispatchers. They are available a lot more than what they have been in the past, and hopefully in the future we will have more dispatchers available, and they will also be more available to the industry as well. So accidents and lost property was another topic that we dealt with. I wanted to see what how the industry was handling their lost property. Everybody I've spoken with already has a good policy in place on how they handle it. But as you can imagine, we get a lot of lost property calls. The industry also gets a lot of lost property calls. And I think between our dispatchers and the industry, we return a ton of property. Doesn't mean we get to all of it, but but I like the processes that are in place on both our side and on the industry side. Another topic that has come up early on when I first took over at the agency were wheelchair accessible vehicles and the process for that. I believe for the locals, I believe they're getting taken care of fairly well with the program that's in place with the certificates. And we have a statistic in here about the elderly and disabled riders and that program. But I received a call from a gentleman probably last November, somebody that comes into town at least 2 or 3 times a year, and he has an adult son that likes to play blackjack, and his son is in a wheelchair, and they've had a difficult time almost every time they come here with getting around town, not only from the airport to wherever they're going, but from casino to casino. And I've talked with the industry about that. I honestly do not have a solid solution on how to get that up right now. I'm looking for suggestions. One suggestion that I heard that I'm going to approach the airport with was having a lane out at the airport for just wheelchair accessible vehicles, because I've been out to the airport, I've seen what it looks like in the pit. And if a wheelchair accessible vehicle gets stuck in the pit, they're going to be stuck there until everybody moves out of the way for them to get out to a call. Could be a 30-minute, 40-minute wait, whatever. Which is, on the other hand, if you're waiting for that vehicle to get there, it's going to drive down your time. So if we can get a lane specific to just wheelchair accessible vehicles, I'm going to approach the airport and see if that's something doable. From what I understand from the industry, that may have happened in the past, but I'll look into it and see if we can do something similar to that. That takes care of maybe some issues at the airport, does not take care of the issues downtown. Again, I'm open to suggestions on that. I know some of the companies have incentive programs for their drivers to take wheelchair accessible vehicles out there. But those drivers, I think a lot of times are out doing their business as well. So if they're on a ride and somebody calls in and needs a wheelchair accessible vehicle, they got to wait until that ride is dropped off and then go. So I'm impressed that some of the industry companies are doing incentives. I just think that we need to do better, and I'm not sure what that solution is yet, but I will be working on that. By the end of this month, I'm setting up a meeting with the industry. As you may or may not know, Governor Lombardo, Executive Order number 3, something very high and important to him, wants to look at the regulations, wants to do more deregulation and change NACs, NRSs, and things that we can work on. Obviously, we just heard one that may need to be addressed. But by the end of the month, I'm going to set up a meeting with the industry. From what I understand, this has been an ongoing process in the past. I'll just leave it at that. I'm kind of starting all over. And so I talked with the industry about it as I've gone out and talked with them. And starting by the end of this month, we're going to have a meeting and bring to the table what it is they want to take a look at, things that I can take a look at, the staff and I, and see what we can get done to try to update this. So we're going to do that over a Teams meeting, and I'm sure there will be more meetings to follow. We've already discussed the surcharges. I don't really have any more to add other than what I've already said about that. Our staffing, I've got 2 new enforcement officers starting on Monday. And I know Marie has gone and done some interviews just this week for dispatchers. So we're moving in the right direction. I think we were fully staffed for maybe 6 or 7 hours at one point. And it's such an ebb and flow.
That's an accomplishment.
It was. I was so proud of ourselves. But it is a high priority for me. When we do have an opening, it's something I want to jump on and get done because my staff, I'm so blessed to have the staff I have. They all pitch in, they all work, they work really well together. But I certainly want to let you guys know that the enforcement staff, while I was wearing two hats, they did a really, really good job. They were out working, they were understaffed. Again, I'm trying to fix that. But now that Adam's here and he'll be taking over the enforcement staff, I just want you guys to know I didn't get to spend as much time with the enforcement staff that I would like to, and they did a great job. So I want to just let you guys know how much I appreciated them. Something I found out that a lot of our enforcement staff have not taken an oath of office. So next Monday, I have the director of B&I coming over. He's going to issue the oath of office to our whole enforcement staff. So I've scheduled a mandatory training for that afternoon for the whole agency, and the oath of office will be given to the enforcement staff, and I hope you get a nice agency photo. Going back to the enforcement staff real quick. This last Friday, the enforcement staff went out and got a UPT. Digging into the UPT a little bit, this guy was on the terrorist watch list. He's a registered sex offender, and he's been out doing rights. So I just want the industry to know that we're out there. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing with the amount of people that we have, and we're dealing with some very dangerous people. And again, my staff, from dispatch to the enforcement to the front end staff, I couldn't be happier with who we have. So having said that, unless you guys have any questions about any of that, I'll try to jump into some stats.
Before you go too far,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Sure.
With your new addition to the deputy administrator spot, hopefully you guys can facilitate some joint targeted operations against UPTs where you force multiply your team in order to address the huge problem that's out there. That'd be great.
Yes, sir. We've already discussed that, and that's something else that we do.
There was a bill requiring a overall review of 706 to make it consistent with the NTA's part of it. Is that, you mentioned some statutory changes. Is that anything that you're working on that you're even aware of, or that anybody's working on that we know?
Currently, yes.
It is.
Yes, we've had several meetings.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, the sunset committee is still, we're
Correct.
still being reviewed by that.
Okay.
Correct.
And then you haven't gotten to the stats yet, so I'll hold off on the next one. Go ahead.
Okay. So the first page, I don't think that there's a lot right there that I really need to address. Over the total monthly trips, we're up a little bit from last year. Same with the revenue on the second page. And then the monthly combined trip comparison between 24 and 23. It seems like we had a couple of months that we're down a little bit, but we're back up in June, May and June. You can see that the employee trips are down a little bit, but the lease trips are up. So I think that just kind of offsets those two things. The trend is more lease drivers than the employee drivers. The medallions, they have not changed. They're still at 35.30. The lease decals, we're at 1547, and you can see you can see the numbers on those. And yeah, you can compare those to the medallions by the company as well. Do you have any questions about those type of stats? And if not, I'll go into the agency stats a little bit. Okay.
Well, I just have one
Okay.
question. At police, is my sense that police decals remain fairly static?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I will tell you that there's more cabs on the road now. Every month, we're getting more cabs out. And speaking with the agency, getting vehicles has been, I believe it was Member Soderberg earlier talking about the cabs and the drivers are two of the really difficult things. Vehicles really seem to be a big issue right now. I think with the leases, the drivers is maybe getting a little bit better, but getting vehicles has really been a difficult situation. I think Member Decker knows this as well. Just even getting law enforcement vehicles, we've had a really difficult time in the last few years to get those. So, agency statistics. You can see our citations are up, and again, my enforcement staff, I'm very proud of them. They're getting out there. We are down some people. Again, I've got 2 starting next week, and I've got a couple more positions to fill there. The number of violations really are the exact amount that we had in May. So I know we haven't had a board meeting in a couple months, so I tried to put a couple of statistics down for both May and June. The impounds, we had 6 this month. We had 12, but in May we had EDC, so that was the big reason for the jump in May. Accidents, again, I wanted to talk a little bit about the accidents. In May, we had 302. This month, we had 263. That takes up a lot of our time. We are responding to accidents, and then our dispatch handles a lot of accidents that are just taps and no damage accidents. But you can see that's a lot of calls. We have a lot of calls. Assaults were up this month, 5. And maybe it was the heat. I don't know. But I can tell you my attitude gets a little worse when it's 120 degrees, which I heard we had a record here. We talked a little bit about the lost properties, just to give you an idea. Down at the bottom of that, on the dispatch events, 99 lost property cases. We had 96 in May. So you can see it's something that I think we can do better on. I've asked the industry when I've gone out and to talk with them, just to make sure that the drivers are abiding and they're looking in their cabs and checking the cabs after their rides, and hopefully we can bring those numbers down a little bit. In May, we had 916 events. This month, we had 1,079. So we're busy. We stay busy. Citation violations, again, we're at 98. You can kind of see where a lot of those violations are coming from. The rotation of the taxi stand is a big one. I know my guys are out at the airport a lot, and that's where they get a lot of those violations. And then the obeys laws, safety and comfort and convenience with 51. That's kind of our catch-all statute or catch-all violation that we write. Because a lot of things just kind of fit into that statute.
You're writing primarily traffic violations fall into that?
Yes.
Yeah, just so the board knows.
Yeah. Our vehicle inspectors, you can see under the monthly vehicle reports, the out-of-service vehicles that we're doing. The OSN's issues 176, 24-hour issues, 201 accidents, obviously, with as many accidents that we have, 278. You can see our vehicle inspectors stay very busy. fact, I hardly ever even see them. They come in at about 2 o'clock in the morning, then they get out, and I don't see until they come back to finish up their paperwork at the end of the day. So very, very happy with those guys. Again, I think I already said it, 3,082 cabs. When I started, we were under 3,000. Now we're up to 3,082. The disabled and elderly rides, I addressed that with the industry. I've spoken with you guys about it a little bit. It's something that I want to look into a little bit more and see if we can do a little bit better than what we're doing. And then the credit card transactions. Open to any suggestions, any questions. Hopefully I can answer them, but yeah.
I have one question. Who's doing the pre-hearing negotiations, citations?
Well, if it's an impound, we have our DAGs that will do that.
But the
And
citation, the pre-hearing,
just on the citation.
negotiation.
It's one of our legal staff. It's our legal secretary.
Tell her, good luck, good job, and that you probably owe her lunch.
Yes, right here.
Oh, nice work. So the more obey laws, the more traffic violations, the more generally you have people that come in and want to challenge them because they don't like the fact that they got a ticket for driving like a maniac.
Right.
And so generally the more hearings the agency has to. In 2017, we implemented that negotiation program, and your numbers are off the chart. And those are all cases that you don't have to go to hearing on. So yeah, nice work.
Yeah.
I had one question.
Yes, sir.
Comparing May to April and June to May on credit card transactions, they just, it's like they completely fell off the edge, and I'm just,
We were discussing this yesterday, and I believe it's just because the number of rides were down. So you have fewer.
okay, so it's a function of just how many transactions were
Right.
done?
Yeah, that's the only thing that we could think. Yeah.
It just,
Yeah, it was a drop off for sure.
I just was thinking some fee go in that I wasn't aware of.
Not that I'm aware of either.
Any questions on statistics?
I have no questions.
Ms. Webb, anything we need to know? Anything we need to know, council? Future agenda items. I think we discussed the surcharge matter. Will be back on next month. Anything, and I believe we will have a contested case. Yeah, we have a contested case. You've been blessedly not bothered by it so far.
But you have, I'm assuming.
Anything else? Anything anybody wants on the agenda? Okay. That then will conclude agenda item 7, taking us to agenda item 8, which is our second public comment session. This is on our agenda pursuant to Nevada open meeting law. It's an opportunity for members of the public to address us on matters within our jurisdiction. We cannot take action on those matters raised, but we do welcome any comments from the public.
I'll make this brief. Good morning. For the record, I'm Kimberly Maxon Rushton with the law firm Cooper Levinson. I just wanted to take the opportunity to congratulate Officer Teddy, our Administrative Director, Officer Teddy, on his appointment. I will tell you that in conjunction with Administrator Park at the NTA, they did an amazing job with getting their enforcement staff out and really tracking the illegals. In fact, at last week's NTA meeting, I would say no fewer than 10 small certificated limo carriers appeared before the NTA and said, we need help. There are so many illegal operators out there and they're not being cited. Well, you take one look at the NTA's agenda and they're being cited. I mean, there are only so many officers, but to see the number of illegal operators go from 50 on an agenda to 86, 90 consistently at each month demonstrates the fact that they're out there. And so I wanted to say that I believe that with the leadership of Administrator Park and Deputy Administrator Teddy, you're going to have an enforcement staff that is keenly aware of all of the aspects of the illegal operators. But one thing that I think is important, and perhaps this is an industry notice, is the fact that oftentimes when there are illegal operators staging at a prime property on the strip, and then there are certificated carriers and the officers are out there, the certificated carriers drivers will point out to the illegal operators who the NTA and TA officers are. That's dangerous, first and foremost, and it doesn't help their job. So I've asked my clients, just please speak to their drivers and everything and ask them, please do not alert the illegal operators to who the officers are, because they're out there doing their job. They're putting their lives at risk, and their ultimate goal is to protect the traveling public. So again, I commend you on the appointment and appreciate the hard work that they did at the NTA, and I believe that that will continue here at the TA and ensure that we can address this ongoing issue with the illegal operators. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public present in Las Vegas who wants to make comment? Is there anybody online that would like to make comment? Okay, that will close agenda item 8, which takes us to adjournment. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I should have brought caffeine. I'm dragging.
I agree with you.
Okay, let's see.
I barely made it with the one shot.
Well,